Hey guys, so I'm at one of my favorite places in all of Missouri. It is called Elephant Rock State Park. It's got these humongous rocks. There are no elephants, so don't be looking for those. But one of the things I love about this place is the views that you can see whenever you get up on top of the rocks. I love places where you can just see far, and it reminds me of one of the more sad stories in the Old Testament. It's the story of Moses in Numbers chapter 27, where Moses reaches the end of his life, and God brings him up on this humongous mountain so that he can see into the promised land. You see, the promised land was a place where Moses was leading his people for 40 years, and he was leading a stubborn people, a rebellious people, a people who disobeyed God. And Moses' job essentially was to get them to the promised land, get them over to this area, and make sure you don't lose any of them, and to argue on their behalf to God. And now Moses was right here on the doorstep of taking them over there into the promised land, and God had to have a conversation with him. God has this conversation with him. He tells him, "Thank you for leading my people to the promised land. These stubborn people, these rebellious people, I'm gonna let them go to the promised land, but Moses, you're not gonna go." And the reason he does that is he says, because of the way that you treated my people whenever you got water out of a rock. Now, I don't know if the rocks that Moses was hitting or trying to get water out of was as big as these rocks. But what happened was, at the very beginning of Moses leading his people, 40 years ago, he was leading a group of slaves out of Egypt. These people had spent hundreds of years in slavery. Moses was now their leader, and they were begging for water. And so God tells Moses, take your staff and hit it against one of those rocks, and then water's gonna come out for the people. And so Moses does that. Now, 40 years later, Moses is leading a completely different group of people. He's not leading a group of slaves anymore. The slaves has died off as they were wandering in the wilderness. These were people who, for the first time in their country's history, in their history as a nation, they were a free people. They never served under anybody other than God. And so God says, at the end of this 40 years when they're asking for water, he says, I want you to do the same thing. I want you to go to the rock, but this time I want you to speak to the rock, and then water will come out. But Moses, instead of speaking to it, he treats these free people as if they were still slaves, and he takes his stick, just like a slave master would do. He hits it against the rock, uses his stick as authority, uses it as power, hits it against the rock, water comes out. And God essentially has to tell Moses, Moses, I'm leading people to a free land. And if I'm gonna do that, I need someone who knows how to lead free people. Now Moses was gonna have to step aside so that a guy named Joshua can come forward and start leading people into that next phase. And so whenever I come to a place like this, one of the things that I always remember, especially as a leader, is that it matters how you lead people. God's not just calling us to lead people to a place. God's not calling us just to lead people to a future, into this promised land that we personally want to go to. He's calling us to lead a group of free people. You see, today we're leading a group of people who are free in Christ. And the people that we talk to in our churches, the people that we sit by in our small groups, the people that we're having conversation with, we don't need to treat them like slaves. We don't need to talk down to them. We don't need to beat them with sticks. We don't need to beat them over the heads with Bible. We need to do what God told Moses to do. Just speak and then let the water flow. One of the things that I love about Moses' story is that he never got to go into the promised land, but he did get to experience the fruit of the promise. In the New Testament, we get this great story where once again, there's this mountaintop experience. This time it's Jesus on this mountain that is located in the promised land. And we get to see the kingdom in all of its fruition. Israel is established. The King of Israel, Jesus, is there in Israel. And Jesus is on top of this mountain praying. His full glory is being revealed. And guess who appears on that mountain in the promised land? Moses. Moses appears. And so we actually get to see that eventually Moses does get to experience the promised land. But for him, by that time, he knew that the best part of the promised land wasn't the place over there, but it was the relationship that he had with God. He experienced God on a mountain in Sinai. He experienced God telling him he's not going to go into that land. And now he's experiencing God on a mountain with Jesus, the King, where everything was leading up to. And I have to imagine that was a great ending to Moses' story. If you've never been here, I recommend coming checking out. Missouri is a beautiful place, lots of great sights, and a great God who made all this that we get to experience. So thanks for watching. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and we'll catch you later. Bye.